It's the day before the Tour de France begins. And I think that's the first time I've seen this place without any people, so that's a, good reason to get up at 5:30 in the morning. And alright, I've got bucket loads of content to share with you. And, well, I'll get around to editing it. No, first up, let's go with an interview with Michael Rogers. I got to know Mick back in the mid-90s, let's say, when he was just a little teenage kid growing up with a cycling family, or a family that became a cycling family thanks to Pete Rogers and Dean Rogers, his older brothers. And, well, Michael Rogers, Mick Rogers, call him what you will, but ideally by his name, he's a fantastic bloke who has, shared this cycling journey with me since I was but a young man in my 20s. And now he's helping shape the way that the sport's run. Or he did for a few years there while he worked for the UCI. Before that, he raced a bike. And this is Michael's story. I hope you enjoy the interview. It was completely and utterly impromptu, where we sat down. I said 10 minutes and then we went almost 25. So I'm going to run it more or less verbatim. There's no need to edit any of it. We talked honestly and openly and frankly, and I thought it was quite an interesting discussion. Well, if you like it, just bang a comment in below and let me know what you think. Cool. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Michael Rogers, we finally got to catch up without the interruption of loudspeakers and all sorts of things going on in the background, which isn't common for bike riders. But you're not a bike rider anymore. You've been in admin for, let's say, 10 years almost.
Well, I stopped in 2016.
Yeah.
So 8 years have already passed.
You've been with UCI for a couple of years, but you've had, let's say, multiple roles. Can you just go through what that was all about? And
so started with UCI in a technical role as head of, let's say, bikes and clothing and regulations around all technical elements. So COVID started 2020. Moved into, after about 12 months, took over the head of road cycling. Mm-hmm. So part of that remit was looking after, the international calendar, all the teams, from the top of both women and men at world tour level, all the way down to continental level. So some 300 teams, oversaw that. And then also with regards to race organisers. So very broad role. We had I led about a team of about 12, 15 people, as well as the technical side. So intense, very, not quite 24/7, but close to it, because there's always a race going on somewhere in the world, whether it's in a different country or a different time zone. So very intense work, but I mean, what a privilege, really, really understand how the sport works. I spent a long part of my career as a cyclist, and let's say from the inside of the barriers looking out. So it was definitely really nice to also see the other perspective from the outside in, understanding, the challenges of the teams, understanding the challenges of race organisers, some of the difficulties they have of putting a course together, and bringing together these events that, from an organisation perspective, are becoming more and more complex each year.
Yeah, we're about to start the Tour de France is about to start in 2 days' time.
Yes.
And everyone likes to chime in with what ought to be done to make the race safer, more efficient, more popular, blah, blah, blah. But road cycling isn't done in a stadium. So there's so many elements to consider. I'm just watching Florence get prepared, and I just can't believe the level of organisation that actually gets pulled off.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that things run on time, and that bigger accidents don't happen. not only from the perspective of the riders, where there's been quite an alarming increase over the last 5-6 years of the amount of incidents, but also outside of the race, the amount of spectators. One of the fascinating elements of that I had no idea of before joining the UCI is what really goes into organising a race. Some of those logistics, route planning, by choosing a particular way through the city, if that's not carefully planned, it could potentially cut off half of the city's access to hospital. You get my point.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of planning, and unfortunately sometimes solutions need to be found. There could be a direct, straight road to the finish, but sometimes, once the local governments or the local city planners get hold of that route and they really look into the details and look at the consequences of that particular route choice, that could be the most efficient. There can be situations where it cuts off, as I mentioned earlier, half the city to a hospital or a million other different reasons. So it was very fascinating, learning that, from the UCI and all the other intricacies there of the sport.
We met when you were still a junior. I think you won 1997 Junior Australian Cyclist of the Year, and you got up and said that you admired the likes of Hank Vogels and Stewie O'Grady, and that you look forward to smashing over the cobbles yourself one day. You've done a lot on the bike. You've been a professional in cycling well over half of your life now. When you compare your administration role versus your riding role, what I know that you've moved on from riding as a professional, but what would you pick now that you've had hindsight to consider both careers?
Well, that's an interesting question. I had a fantastic time as a professional cyclist, young kid growing up in Australia. As soon as I had the chance to go over to Europe, I was there. Left home when I was 16. I kind of, I guess, missed out on the normal path of, having academic pathway studies, going to university and acquiring skills during kind of more traditional methods. I guess I was opposite. I grew up on the streets, if I can say it that way, as a cyclist. I had some hard lessons along the way, but great lessons, and surrounded by, great people, some of the names you mentioned earlier, Stuart, Hank, Neil Stevens, Alan Piper, were just some of the people, from Australian roots that I came across and learned a lot from. But outside of that, there's also a lot of people. My wife is Italian, so I got very into Italian cycling and had a lot of people to draw from there as well. So I don't think I'd have it any other way. I think the journey, I would have done things differently, of course, with hindsight. But I still love the sport, and it gets me up every morning, and it's still a passion for me. It's still in my DNA, just from a different perspective, no longer as an athlete, but more of an admin role.
There's a few people I know who could pretty much drop every name in cycling for the last 20 years or so, and you're one of them. I think about the people you've ridden with, if it's Sir Mark Cavendish, Sir Bradley Wiggins, Alberto Contador. We could go on and on and on about people that you've raced with, against, in collaboration, as rivals. What's the thing from your career that I guess if you have your pro cycling dreams, what memory comes flashing back as the fondest?
I think there was many kind of periods of just fun, success, and also on the opposite side of periods of illness and children, and that journey that one goes through over 16 years of professional cycling as an athlete. When I turned professional with Mapei, back in 2000, 2001. It was really my kind of introduction into professional cycling. It was a Italian-based team. Mr. Giorgio Squinci, the late, of course, Giorgio Squinci, very passionate person. Put together I guess a development program, was to bring up a generation of professional cyclists and treat them as young kids, which we were. We were 19s and 20s or early 20s, and another great name, Aldo Sassi, really tried to teach us professional cycling as a lifestyle, as a profession. And it's, when you look back at those times, that Mapei was just such an early adopter of what's happening quite a lot now with a lot of other teams. Your little Treks, your Visma Lisa bike, newcomers, Tudor. They all have these development teams, and now understanding that to develop talent, it has to come through a pathway. So Mapei was very much on the forefront of that, and that was just a privilege to be part of. Very, very lucky. Cancellara, Filippo Pozzato, Bernie Eisel, just to name a few.
Cadell Evans.
Yeah, Cadell. Came along to the program, Charlie Wood Julius from Great Britain. It was just a great group to be of it, and we learned to win from day one. The talent we had, and we learned to win bike races. We learned to be teammates. We learned to live and work together. So it was great, and they were skills that I took on for the rest of my career. I was very fortunate enough to ride with great teams, Quickstep, High Road, HTC. Had a great time at Sky with Brad Wiggins, winning Tour de France with him, and then the later part with Contador and Peter Sagan, and I consider myself lucky, lucky and because not everyone gets that chance to live that life and have that success that I had personally, but also as a team member.
There's a long list of victories that you've had, but it was also as a domestique that you really made your name. But it was in 2007 when you crashed while, let's say, virtual lead of the Tour de France, and then 2014 when you finally got the stage win in Luchon. Does the Tour de France sort of stand out greater than the two stage wins at the Giro, for example, or how does the Tour compare with the other events that you're?
For me, the Tour was a childhood dream. Those are the images that I grew up with, watching on TV. So I think for yet any young aspiring athlete or cyclist, male or female, the Tour de France is just the pinnacle of that side of the sport. Of course, there's the World Championships, Olympic Games, the Giro d'Italia. They're all important races, just to name a few. One-day classics, of course. But I think for Australian athletes or Anglo-Saxon countries, I think the Tour de France holds a special place in everyone's heart. And for me to finally be able to win a stage, let's say towards the back end of my career, that was just a dream come true. I'd been so close so many times and made errors or a bit of bad luck or you name it. It took me a while to achieve that dream, which was, and then for me, once I'd won a stage, it was, that was the icing on the cake of my career, and from there I kind of just slowed down and more dedicated myself to other riders.
We're covering off a range of topics, so I haven't got anything scripted. I know that I've followed your career well. We've known each other since
for a long time.
For a very long time, and we've grown and we've watched cycling evolve, and certainly Australian cycling evolve. Like the things that you've just listed in your accomplishments alone would never have been like even part of the conversation when we first met.
Right.
Where do you see it going from here? You've been, because of the role with the UCI, you came to the World Championships in Wollongong, you raced the World Championships in Geelong. Is there scope for it to improve on the competitive level in Australia? And I mean, you don't live there, you have a very European lifestyle, but do you still see that there's growth opportunities in sport, or is cycling's future in participation?
Well, there's a part of me that would like to see, a huge part of me is still Australian, of course, and nowadays I live most of my time in Europe, but there's definitely a soft place for me in Australia, and the continued development of the sport on the elite side. I think the key to that really sits with talent, and we have lots of talent in Australia. Unfortunately the NRS system, and road racing in Australia has I think lost a little, and there's various reasons for that. It's very, very complicated to organise races now with all the requirements, of police and insurances and a million different other reasons, safety, so it seems to me that's dropped off a little bit. I really do feel the system has changed also a lot in the way that when I grew up there was a lot of systems. One stands out, Shane Bannon, people like Brian Stevens. They were constantly taking athletes to Europe, introducing them into I think not only elite racing but also what it's like to live in Europe, what it's like to be an ordinary person when you're not racing, to return to an ordinary day life and be able to manage yourself in European culture. So I'd really like to see those kind of programs really develop, and if I take that long-term view, I think that's where the money is best invested, is in grassroots programs. Of course, the Olympic program is very important, but I personally like to see more focus on grassroots development, because that's where the talent will come, and the more talent we have, the more access to to potential medals there are.
I get frustrated in an Olympic year. It's pretty much right up until the day of competition, and then I love it. My heart lies with team pursuit. You've had success in that discipline yourself at Commonwealth Games level, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you've sort of got me, triggered a few thoughts of topics that I try to avoid these days, because I sort of get frustrated with the obsession of the Australian Federation of cycling on the Olympic agenda. Is there value in that? I mean, that's sort of more or less continuing from what you just talked about, but their justification for the quest for Olympic gold is that it inspires people to ride a bike, but surely riding a bike inspires people to ride a bike.
I think we're talking about a very elite, the real kind of pinnacle of the iceberg. Male team pursuit, it's always been the kind of blue ribbon event. A lot of investment goes into it. If I put my kind of previous UCI hat on, I think there's quite a few concerns about the direction, of such elite events, and they're going, and the amount of investment that needs to be fulfilled to be able to stay competitive. The evolution of the sport and aerodynamics, science, the technical elements of the sports is very costly to make athletes go very fast, and I think looking on the longer term, there's definitely, I think, some concerns about the cost of staying competitive at such a high pinnacle competition such as the team pursuit, where it's just pure science. all-timed events are very susceptible to to engineering, and whereas bunch events or group events, there still is that sense of variability. And the surprise or what if scenario, if you look at on road race, it's not so reverse engineerable, because you still have those cases of variability. I don't know, maybe crosswinds or corners or something that creates a bit of variability in the event. So I think it's not only a question for Australian cycling. I think it's a broader question for the sport in general. Is are we putting ourselves as a sport in a position where only very few can stay competitive, and is that good for the sport or not? And that was always one of the difficult things for the governing body, was to where do we set the line of what is too much innovation, what is not enough innovation, and that's a tricky discussion. Bringing everyone to the table and finding common ground, so we can allow innovation, but also not let innovation go in a way that younger families or young parents trying to get their children into the sport, whereas they can't stay competitive because they haven't got sensor ABC or one of the the latest innovations. So it's a topic fascinating for me, and a topic that probably to the medium to longer term that needs to be resolved. Otherwise, we may find ourselves in a position where the cost of staying competitive is just too high, for not only for individuals but also for nations.
To consider the UCI position that you had in the time that you were there, they've essentially introduced the gravel worlds. They sort of want to have their talons in every element of cycling, and that's understandable. They're the governing body of a sport. But the Edinburgh Worlds, I think it would have been exciting to be there, but it was difficult to manage, I reckon, for the media and for a lot of national teams as well. Was there merit in that experiment? And we see mountain biking prosper to a level which is like the crowds are insane. Same with particular road cycling events. What seems to be, from your experiences in Aigle in Switzerland, the priority for the government, for the governing organisation, is one, discipline given more more support, more backing, more.
Well, the UCI has a mandate of developing cycling, and that's a mandate given by the International Olympic Committee, to kind of govern cycling in a way. And part of that is getting more people on seats and on bicycle seats. That could be BMX. It could be cycling esports. All those seats have the same value. Of course, you have your more traditional, more developed sports, such as road cycling, track. I think cycling at the Olympic Games, it has the third largest quota of athletes of all sports, and that's only behind swimming and athletics. So I think more disciplines will come up over time, but how they get divided, which backsides go into seats, which seats, I don't know. But numbers are increasing. I mean, cycling's doing great. Cycling's really on a worldwide scale. We're here in Florence a couple of days before the tour and start, and the amount of people here for the race walking around the city is just astronomical. So cycling's doing great as a participation sport. I think the industry has been through, of course, a tough time the last couple of years, but fingers crossed that starts to turn around. And but when I look here in Florence, how many people there are, I think it's still encouraging.
there's a team presentation to go to. There's many other things to do while we're here, but I really appreciate you taking 25 minutes of your time to, just run over a few bits and pieces. I will just, I really need to ask this question because it's sort of pertinent to the times, but you were in charge of some technical innovations, and we had a coffee the other day and you said, look, there has to be limitations on bicycle design. You and Adam Hansen were cohort in trying to minimise some extreme positions that have come about in recent times. And you made the comment, if there wasn't limits on a bike, people would be racing the Tour de France on recumbents. Can you just, give me 1 minute worth of commentary about that, just so that we understand that kind of... People in 2024 are hypercritical. They have an opportunity to be anonymous and offer commentary online, and I just wonder how you respond or what you get.
Yeah, sure. Well, I will make commentary about the elite part of the sport, which is the professionals and the competitive side of the sport, where performance is the leading factor of any decision that's made, whether it's by a cyclist, whether it's made by the performance directors or the team management. So it's a lot of the time it is the performance element that is kind of driving the evolution of the sport. If we look into pure investments, in the sport, a lot of that has gone into performance. If we look at the various segments of the sport, I don't have any raw data, but you could probably say that 75% of that kind of investment has gone into the performance of the athlete. And again, I'm talking about the elite side of the sport. Now that's come at amazing experience of watching races, higher speeds, bigger gearing, fantastic bike design. But on the other side of the sport, there's maybe some other things or other topics that have not evolved at that same speed, and a lot of those can be safety. We've seen a huge spike in the amount of crashes that's going on, in again the pro pelotons, but I think also in lower levels, and a lot of those are behavioural. Of I don't only highlight the riders, but kind of anyone in the race convoy. There may be the time where we very soon have to look at, that regulation may not be able to solve the entire problem. And, there has to be behavioural changes as well. So that's something the sport has to go through. But to answer, I think, your question directly about, that there needs to be some kind of regulation. There is regulation, of course. There's technical regulation set by the UCI, and of course they're evolving. But I would say the evolution is probably outpacing the regulation, which is common. Normally innovation in the world outpaces the regulatory body. So, but there's very smart people at the table, and it takes time. I think we need to be careful of also jumping to very, very quick decisions. We really have to understand the problem first, because I was talking to some people the other day. They said, "Oh, it's easy. We just widen tires and have everyone return to lower profile wheels." And I'm not sure that's the solution, because wider tires are now proving to be faster than skinnier tires will ever were. So by introducing that regulation, you could actually increase speeds. So it needs to be a very broad discussion, and unfortunately some of these things take time.
Like I said, we could go on and on and on, but we've covered a hell of a lot of territory. Thanks. we'll get out for that ride one of these days like we did back in the olden days.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael.